Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. All right, so in the previous video, we were able to conclude the part 2 of the full stack open exercises, right? So if you've not seen those videos, please do well to watch them, right? So in this video, we are going to be starting with the part 3 of this program. That's the full stack open, right? And we are going to be starting with exercise 3.1, which is the step 1 of the PhoneBook backend. So this part 3 is mostly focused on the back end, right? We can see that in the parts 1 and 2, we mostly dwelled on the front end of things, right? So starting from this part 3, we shall be looking at the back end, right? So let's see what the instruction says. It says implement a node application that returns a hard-coded list of PhoneBook entries from the address. So this means that when we pass this address into a browser or any client service, such as this, we can see here we have the endpoints here, right? Passed into this place here. When we click on the enter, we are expected to get this data returned in the browser here. That's the front end, right? So that's the target. So here we can choose to use the browser as our client service. We can also choose to use Postman and all sorts, right? But let's see how we are going to do that. Let's go into the code implementation and see what to do. All right, so here is my VS Code, and then here is the setup folder for step 1 of the part 3. We can see that step 1 here is a folder inside the PhoneBook backend, and PhoneBook backend is another folder inside the part 3, right? Because we are going to be having a lot of steps, right? So I just choose to structure my code this way so it doesn't confuse us, right? Okay, so what we need to do is to begin to write the backend code. Now, if you can see here, I've successfully installed Express. You also need to do that. You install Express in your root folder, right? So just follow the way it is done in the course, right? And you are going to get it, right? So you install it as a dependency, and then we can see here that here we have our main as index.js. So I'm simply going to create a file called index.js. So here I'll simply just create a new file and then call it index.js, and this is where we are going to be writing our backend codes, right? Okay, all right. So um we need to cd into this. Let's see if we already cd into this step 1. Yes, so we are currently in this step 1 already, right? So that's okay. So let's begin to write our code. The first thing we need to do is to import Express, right? Now let's say const Express equals to require. Now this is the way we install Express using the common JS, right? There are other ways we can install Express, right? So if you are working with ES6, you might need to use the import statements, right? So you import from, but here we are using the common JS, so we use the require method to import our libraries. All right, so after doing this, we need to create an instance of this Express. So by saying Express with the round bracket, we've created an instance of this Express, right? Here we need to assign this to a variable name. Let's call it app, because we are trying to build an application, right? So the next thing we want to do is, let's save this. The next thing we want to do is we want to, let me go back to the instruction 3.1. We want to work with this data here, right? So what we can do is, let's copy this data, let's paste it here, right? And then let's call it a name. Let's call it persons. Then let's save. Now persons is not going to be properly defined, right? Because we need to use a let or a const to actually get this done properly. Now what do you think we should use, a let or a const? Bear in mind that we need to be pushing some more data into this particular person's data, right? So if we if we add another name such as John with another number, is going to give us another ID of another data, right? So this data is supposed to be accepting more data. That means it's supposed to be updated, right? That means we can't use const. If we use const, it means this data is a constant. Nothing can be added to it, right? So we are going to be using let. Let allows us to update our data, right? So let's save this. So we've saved this, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to create an endpoint that is going to help us to display this data the way it is here on our client services. Our client service can be a browser, which we have here. You can see here that this is a browser, right? And the moment we call this localhost 3001 slash API slash person, the data we have here, the data we have in our code here should be returned here. All right, so here is what we can do. Looking at this endpoint here in the instruction here, we can see that we are expected to be on a port 3001 and then having the endpoint API slash persons. So this is what we can actually do. We say app dot. Now we are going to be using this app instance, right? So we say app dot get, because here we are trying to get data, right? Then we say slash, then we put API slash persons. We say API slash persons. Then this app dot get, it accepts a callback as well, which is something like this. So this callback, it accepts two parameters which we are going to be using for now. One of them is the request and the other is a response, right? So I am going to just use the short form rec and then res. Now, after doing this, what we need to do is we want to send this data, right, through this endpoint to the client service, such as the browser. So we say response dot send. Send what? Send this person's data. So we simply just put persons here and we save this. Now this is not going to work yet because we need to create the server, right? So we rather we need to listen to the server, right? So we simply just say app dot listen. Now this is going to accept a port number and also a callback function. So here we can see that the port number used here is 3001. So also let's also use 3001 and then let's give it a callback as well. So inside this callback, we can just say console log and then we can just put something descriptive to actually tell that the app is working fine or the server is running fine. So I think we can just say, let's say server is running properly. Server is running. Or let's see what is being used in the material. Okay, so I'm just trying to check something that is very descriptive, right? And if we can't find, we just create our own, or we just leave it as server is running. Okay, I think we can just write our own as server is running successfully, right? This works too. It doesn't really matter. This does not really affect the code, right? It's just to tell the user what exactly, or is just meant to put in the console, right? What exactly is going on in the background or in the backend, right? So after doing this, our code is on its way to work very well, right? It's not fully functional yet. We still have some implementations to do. So um so after doing this, let's go to the browser and see if anything can happen here. Let me expand this. Now we have this endpoint here. Let's click on enter. Nothing happens, right? Because we need to start the server. Now, how do we start the server? Now, if you recall, it stated here that the application must be started with the command npm start, right? So let's make that happen. So what we can do is in the package.json, we simply just come here and then create a start, more like a property in the script, right? So this is the way it's been done. So we say node index.js. Now you should remember that index.js is a file that holds the backend code, right? So we say node index.js because we are using node to run the server. Then after that, we have to put a comma because there's a next item after it. All right, so we save this, and then how can we get this working? We come in and say npm start here. So we click on enter. All right, so it says server is running successfully. Let's go back to the client service, which is the browser in this case, and let's refresh this and see what comes up. Wow, so here we can see that we have the data successfully returned in the browser as well. Let me expand this, right? So that means that our code works fine, right? Okay, so let's go back to the instruction and see if we are not missing anything. So it says the application must also offer an npm run dev command, right? Now, what this does is that when we are using just the node command, when we come to the index.js and we make changes and we save them, the program does not know that any changes is being made, right? So if I come here and I do, let's change 3000 to 3000, let's change 3001 to 3000 and then save, nothing happens here because Node would not know if there's any changes going on in the file, right? So this is why we need nodemon. So just as the instruction says, let's create a file that is going to help us to update or to watch for any updates in our code. So we simply come here and say, let's call this dev because we are currently in the development stage, right? And then say nodemon index.js. Then after that, we put the comma, right? So it always has to be the file that holds the backend server code, right? That is being passed here. So we save this, and then let's come to the terminal here. Let's terminate this, and then let's do npm run dev instead of npm start. Then let's hit the enter key. Now we can see that this is currently watching our code now for any changes. And if we come to the browser, nothing breaks. Everything still works fine. Oh, this is supposed to work fine. Let's refresh it. Okay, I think I was supposed to install nodemon, which I have not done. Okay, so let's just check some things before doing that. Um, okay, so let's try to install nodemon to see if that works fine. Or I think we are going to do that in the next video, right? So I'm just simply going to stop at this point. All right, so see you in the next video. Bye.